Today we're talking about something your car cannot live without, and that is going to be engine oil. Now, what does engine oil do? Well, engine oil is the lifeblood of your engine. It lubricates all the moving parts inside your engine. So your valves, pistons, crank, anything that's moving has to be lubricated by oil properly, or those parts are going to wear out really fast and be a very, very expensive repair. Now, oil is going to sit in the oil pan of the engine, and the oil pump is going to circulate it through and properly lubricate it. Now, of course, there's a lot more to it than that, and today we're going to tell you all about it. So what is engine oil made up of? Basically, it's going to be a base oil, whether it's crude or done in a lab, and then basically there are additives added to it for different uses. And they can be anti-corrosion, they can be friction modifiers, they can be viscosity modifiers. There's a whole bunch of things get added to get your finished oil. And when you're going to shop for oil for your vehicle, what do the numbers mean? Why do some have a single number and some have multiple numbers? Well, we're starting over here with the single number. So what is that number? That number is viscosity. And viscosity is basically how thick that oil is, how easily that oil is going to flow. When you're starting with a 30 weight oil, basically that is a viscosity rating that is never going to change. So this oil, regardless of temperature, is always going to be at 30. So when you have two numbers like this Penn's oil here, this is what's called a multi-grade oil, which means the viscosity changes based on temperature. This is more common for most of your modern cars, and honestly it works in your classic cars as well. Now, what does 5W30 mean? Well, the 5 is going to be the viscosity when it's cold. That's actually what the W stands for, which is winter. So 5 means it's a very, very thin oil when it's cold. Basically, it's designed at 0 degrees is where that 5 number comes from. So if you live in a cold climate or you start your engine and it's ice cold, this is nice and thin and will quickly lubricate the moving parts. Now, once it gets up to operating temperature, which is where the 30 comes in, the 30 rating is at 212 degrees, basically a normal operating temperature for your engine. What this will do is it actually thickens up as the temperature changes, so as your engine runs hotter, you now have a nice thicker oil. And again, almost every oil will be multi-grade. Now, depending on climate, where you drive, how you drive, will depend on which viscosity you need, but having that multi-grade oil is pretty common and most engines are going to benefit from it. So you know what the viscosity means. Now, which one is right for your car? Well, that's going to depend on a lot of things. And this is a case where bigger is not better. Don't go right for the race oil because the numbers are the larger ones. That's not going to work for most applications. Which one is right for your car? Well, that depends on the engine. The best way to know, though, is to look at the oil cap, or even better, pop the glove box and open that manual that we never look at. It'll tell you which oil to use. Now, the reason you want to stick with the recommended viscosity is when the manufacturer builds your engine, say it's a Coyote in your late model Mustang, they build certain tolerances into that engine and they design it for a specific viscosity oil. So 520, 530, 550, again, depends on what the motor is and how it's being used, but again, go with the manufacturer recommendations. So what about modified cars? Well, if you had an engine built, that's when you want to talk to your engine builder. If they built that motor for you, I guarantee they have a recommended oil they want you to use in their build, and again, you're going to stick to it. Now, what if you have a stock engine, but you modified it? You put a turbo on it, a supercharger. Well, again, in that case, the manufacturers are going to have a recommendation. If you run a Roush supercharger on a Coyote, they want you to run 550. But again, they're actually going to tell you that. It's written in the instructions, and they even give you a sticker to put on your oil cap. Again, you don't want to run right to the heaviest oil because having like a 2050 or a crazy race oil is not going to work in an engine not designed for it. They're designed for those engines that are running 6,000, 7,000 RPM for hours at a time. You're not doing that with your engine, and having oil that thick can actually damage it in the long term. All right, so we talked about what oil is, we talked about viscosity and picking out the right oil for your car. So now, how often should you change your oil? Now, this is a question. You ask 10 people, you're going to get 10 different answers. The rule of thumb back in the day was every 3,000 miles or 3 months, you got to change your oil. Well, times have changed, and with synthetic oils and synthetic blends and all kinds of different oils out there right now, the 3,000 mile rule is pretty much out the window. Modern synthetics, you can go 5,000, 7,500, even 10,000 plus in certain applications, again, if that's what the manufacturer recommends. So with your modern cars, a lot of the times, yes, you're going to have a light on the dash and say, hey, time for an oil change, to let you know when to do it. But they're going to be based off using the correct oil, which goes back to using the right viscosity and using the right amount in that engine, because that's what the manufacturer is going for. Now, can you change your oil too often? Absolutely. I've heard of people, I change my oil every 1,000 miles, like it's a badge of honor. You're pouring money down the drain. There is no reason, unless you've got a full-blown race car, you should ever change it that often. I mean, If you're talking about synthetic especially, I mean, this is an oil that can be good for 5,000, 7,500 miles most times. If you're changing it every 1,000, you're simply wasting money. You're throwing it away. Now, what about your classic car? You don't drive it as much. In that case, you probably want to change your oil about once a year. If you're putting less than 5,000 miles a year on it, you're not going to hit that mileage-wise, but you are going to hit it time-wise, which basically comes down to when you're changing your oil, there's two reasons to do it, either mileage or time. So you want to change it at least once a year, and again, 5,000 to 7,500 is a good rule of thumb. So we talked about viscosity and how often to change your oil. So you're ready to walk in the store and you see an entire wall of oils, and there are different colors and different labels and different brands. So what are the different styles? What oil is right for you? Well, you've got four main styles of oil. You have your conventional oil, you've got your semi-synthetic or synthetic blend, you've got your full synthetic, then you have your high mileage oil. So conventional oil is the old school oil. This is crude, goes through a refinery, has some additives added to it, and it's going to be the cheapest way to do an oil change. This stuff's been around forever. It still works. It still gets the job done. You will have to change it a little bit more than the synthetics, but it is an inexpensive way to do an oil change as far as oil changes go. So where does synthetic blend falls in? Well, what this does basically takes the best of both worlds. The best part of conventional oil is the cost. The best part of synthetic is going to be the properties. This is a mixture of both. So it doesn't have quite the protection or performance as synthetic, but it doesn't cost as much, but it has more synthetic in it than a conventional oil, so it has more protection. This is kind of not as popular as it used to be because synthetic prices have come down, and for the most cases, you can go right to synthetic. You don't need a synthetic blend, but there are a few cars that still recommend the blend, and it is available if you need it. Now, the most common oil these days is going to be your synthetic. Now, your synthetic is an engineered oil. These are basically designed in a lab, and they are produced to have the proper additives, features, everything you want that oil to do is being specifically controlled in a lab. So that's why it is more expensive, but your protection's better. This is going to work better in a performance application. You're going to get longer life out of it. The only negative to synthetic is going to be the cost. Now, the cost in some cases can be twice as much as your conventional oil, but keep in mind it's going to last longer. So, okay, this is twice as much as this at the store. It's like, oh, sticker shock, I need 10 quarts of oil at $11 a quart. That's an expensive oil change. But that'll last you 5, 6, 7,000 miles, where you might want to change this after 3. So even though this is half the price, if you're doing double the work, this honestly isn't a bad deal. Now, one of the newest oils to come out in the market is going to be the high mileage oil. Now, the high mileage oils are almost always a synthetic based oil. So basically you're starting at this point here, but they're designed for cars with 75,000 or more miles. What they do is there's additional additives in that oil that are designed to help with sealing the engine, specifically oil seals. So if your car smokes a little bit, you're seeing a little bit of blue smoke, or you're burning oil, a lot of times switching to the high mileage oil might get you more life out of your engine. Like I mentioned before, if you want to keep your car in tip-top running condition, you have to keep up with oil maintenance. There's no way around it. While today's modern cars will tell you when the oil has to be changed, if you have a classic car or an older car that doesn't tell you that, you definitely want to keep a logbook to make sure that you're keeping up with these oil changes and keeping your car running like it should.